Good morning, everybody. I was just meeting with some legislators and they were asking questions about the budget that I proposed, and I wanted to go over a few details with you. Next week, we will get revenue numbers. That means we'll get some data on how much sales tax we're bringing in for a state based on what people spent in December. We anticipate those numbers will be good because it was Christmas time, but we also know that it's not sustainable. When we look at what's happening at the federal government level and what's being passed as far as proposed tax increases, more regulations, higher energy costs, inflation, it's going to be pretty devastating for South Dakota in the future. So while we're going to get revenue numbers that we'll use for budgeting purposes, I want to prepare everybody that we need to be smart and that we need to be conservative. I've talked with some legislators who are talking about the fact that they are very excited about South Dakota's growth and they think that'll last for a very long time. I wish I could be that optimistic, but I also see how Biden is specifically targeting South Dakota. And I want to remind everybody, we are a high energy demand state. It's cold in the winter, it's hot in the summer, and it's a long ways to drive anywhere in South Dakota. So energy costs take up a bigger portion of people's budgets here in this state than they do anywhere else. And when you have inflation that drives up energy costs, it takes more of our family's budgets and uses it up that can't be spent on anything else. And that's going to impact state revenues. So I want us to be conservative in our growth projections on money that we'll have to spend into the future. And I want us to plan for things that we know that are coming up in the next couple of years that are going to cost the state a lot of money. I talked in my budget address about our prison facilities, that we just completed a prison study that said we absolutely are going to have to, in the next couple of years, look at building $500 to $600 million worth of prison facilities. And this isn't optional for us. Our prisons are overcrowded, they're old, they're in tough shape, and it really is a liability for the state of South Dakota if we don't address it. We don't want to end up in a situation where we didn't plan and we didn't save money for that situation and we end up having to raise taxes to do that. We can't bond for those prison facilities for the full cost because that would use up all of our bonding authority that our universities and technical schools use and tie their hands on projects for the next 15 to 20 years. And I also want people to remember that there's talk about expanding Medicaid in the state of South Dakota. The cost projections on that is another $80 million to taxpayers. And that's a liability in the future that we have to consider could be there if people do decide to support Medicaid expansion. And I also want to remind you, other states that have expanded Medicaid, North Dakota made projections on what it would cost them. Their cost projections have been 43% above what they thought it would cost. Minnesota was even more, almost 50% over what they thought it would cost their state. So if we think the costs in South Dakota will be 80 million, it could be much more. So all these conversations to the legislators made me think that I should explain this to the public, to people too, that we're trying to be smart. We're going to be conservative on revenue projections to make sure we don't spend too much money and we don't set ourselves up for 2 years from now with what's going on with inflation and higher energy costs in South Dakota, that we are in a situation where we have to raise taxes on people who don't have money. We're trying to put more money in reserves. I recommended 14% of our budget into reserves this year to save for those prison facilities. So we're prepared to build those in the future with money that we've saved to do so. And then we also want to make sure that we're using this opportunity to make wise investments that save us money in the long run. So that's a little bit of budget discussion this morning that we're having here in the Capitol. And to keep tuned in and keep weighing in, this is the people's budget, and we need to be smart and we need to make sure that we're keeping the money in your pocket as much as possible. Have a great day.